Hello, my name is Ilina Srivastav, and I'm a psychology student studying in Bangalore. And today I'm in conversation with Dr. Smita Kumar on the topic toxic relationships. Through my experience and through the experience of so many people I know around my age and even older, younger, this topic is not often talked about. Sometimes it's overlooked, but I think it's very important to discuss it because not only does it hamper your well-being at the time, but I think over the long term it has a lot of negative effects on one's attachment patterns, one's psychological well-being, etc. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you, Elena. I too believe very strongly that this is a topic which we really don't talk about a lot. There's hardly any conversation that's happening at home or school, colleges. But when we just grow up and we explore relationships, whether it's romantic, friendships, or otherwise, we tend to find ourselves sometimes in relationships which can be termed as toxic. And we always learn after being in one rather than being aware of it
Yeah.
beforehand. So I cannot emphasize how important and significant this topic is, at least for me, and why we are here to talk about it.
Yes. So to begin with, I would like to ask you, how would you define a toxic relationship, and what do you think are some of the subtle signs that people may overlook if they are in one?
Sure. I think to begin with, a relationship that we don't consider healthy, by which what I mean is that a relationship where there are certain behaviors, patterns, or dynamics which is consistently displayed in a way which is lopsided, where you feel that there is certain harmful behaviors being displayed more often than not,
Mhm.
or maybe one person has the control. So, for example, there is often criticism, right? There is coercion, there is manipulative behavior, or one person feels that they have to walk on eggshells around the other person. You have to constantly watch out for their reaction based on what you're going to say or how they will respond. There is gaslighting. If ever you express your emotions, they often blame you for that rather than listen to you. And of course, as we go deeper, there's probably lack of trust or confidence or even certain amount of abuse. So whether it is psychological, emotional, verbal, physical abuse. So when we see these kind of things in a relationship, then I would clearly say that it is toxic. And if there is abuse, then it is an abusive relationship. And it can come in any form. So it may be in intimate relationships, or it may be in a family dynamics or co-workers, and sometimes even in friendships.
Yes. Do you think it is possible for someone to be in a toxic relationship and not realize it? And if so, what is it that keeps people stuck in that situation?
Okay. So I will go with the first question. So remind me if I missed the second one.
Yes.
Well, I think very often I feel if we grow up in a family setup or in a society where there are certain behaviors which are normalized. For
Mhm.
example, I'll talk about the time when I was growing up, which is now 30 years ago. Very often it was okay for men to be angry, to be aggressive, to not emotionally engage, and to not be there, and you will not talk about your emotional challenges with the male member in the family. And
Yes.
you always had to be quiet and create a very sanitized atmosphere when the male member in the family was coming home, which was often a father, grandfather, or anybody else. Now, when you grow up in a setup like that, then when you end up in a relationship, it doesn't matter whether it is with, in a heterosexual relationship or a homosexual or whatever it is, or a friendship, when those behaviors are being displayed, you will often tend to discount because you've grown up in that scenario. So if somebody is raising their voice in a relationship, if somebody is being overly critical, or if somebody is not engaging emotionally, in the beginning, you will not even question it. Even if
Yeah.
you may not feel okay about it, you will not question it because
Yeah.
it is okay, you know? And
Mhm.
so that I feel is one of the biggest reasons why we may not realize, even though we are in such a relationship. And second, I feel that we do not talk about relationships. There is no forum to talk about relationships. Like I said earlier, that, parents, at least in our society, in Indian society, parents start thinking about their children's marriage, or they think about having grandchildren and all of that right from the time they become a parent. But
Mhm.
how often does a parent sit and talk about healthy relationship, toxic relationship with their child? In schools, do you have forums where you talk about these things? In college,
No, no. Yeah,
right?
it's often a topic that is shunned. It's quite the opposite of being spoken about. It's more like, let's not talk about this. This isn't something we should be talking about.
Right. And so, at least again, going back to 30 years ago, there was no way for us to find out what is a toxic relationship. We didn't even know there was a term called toxic relationship. We didn't even know there were red flags in a relationship to watch out for. And very often, if you were in an intimate relationship or in a close relationship and it was not healthy, nobody will talk about it because there was so much stigma attached to it.
Hmm.
Thanks to social media, there is so much awareness, at least. People are talking about it, although they are talking more in the social media context rather than in forums.
Yeah.
Those conversations are not happening still, right? And so we miss out on figuring out. And when you find yourself trapped in such a relationship, there could be many reasons why you are not able to even acknowledge that it is a toxic relationship, or forget about confessing it to somebody else, because the stigma still stays. And I think there was a follow-up question you had.
Yeah, no, the follow-up question was just about what is it that keeps people stuck in the toxic relationship? Let's say they know they are in one, but why do they still, feel stuck in it?
Right. I think very, very important question. The first part of it is that there is stigma, which we were
Yeah.
talking about, right? So who do you go and talk to, even if you find out that that you are in a toxic relationship? Who are you going to talk to? How are they going to judge you when you tell them? Is there blame game that's going to happen? Are there people who are going to take sides if it's amongst friendships or even in family relationships? So all of that becomes an issue. The second thing is, what is it that you're getting out of the relationship? Why are you in the relationship? And the stakes in the relationship,
Yeah.
right? So, usually, if it is a family setup, the stakes are very high. That means you are going to cause some kind of a disruption where everybody will need to look at that relationship, or they may feel that they have to take sides. So, you will be very reluctant and hesitant to come and talk about it. And if there is a power dynamics where it is two different generations involved, then it becomes even harder,
Yeah.
right? So you will keep quiet and you will just pretend that it doesn't exist, or you will start avoiding. Second, if it is a romantic relationship and you're still in the dating phase or maybe even living in, the stakes are high. What does a breakup mean? Does it mean that, okay, I failed in a relationship? If you're living in together, does it mean that I have to leave this home? If you're married, then the risks are even higher. So
Yeah.
all of that has implications. And in friendships also, if you look at it, that means the group will get divided. That means I'm
Yeah.
not going to be friend with this person, and the others are, whose side are they going to take? So these are at a very pragmatic level, surface level. And the deeper issue is, we are always looking for love, acceptance, and a sense of belonging when we get into a relationship. And all of that becomes outwardly focused. That means, for example, if I'm in a relationship with you, what am I getting from you? Why did I come in a relationship with you? And so, if I'm going to walk out of it, then who is going to be my next anchor? Right? I'm immediately going to look for somebody to replace. And it's not so easy to find that, whether it is a relationship that is romantic or even friendship. We know that from our own experience. So the cost of leaving that relationship may feel so high that we are reluctant to get out of it.
Yeah.
But the moment we realize that the cost of staying in the relationship is higher than the leaving, that is when we will leave.
Yeah.
Make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any examples that you can share from your experience or whatever in your circle of toxic relationship and what it does to people?
Yeah, so I think when you were talking about toxic relationships and friendship groups and how, the group gets split up and people have to take sides, that I very much relate to. I've gone through similar situations. Some of my close friends have gone through similar situations. And I think the sad part is that most often the person who was the victim of a lot of the toxicity is the one who ends up alone in the end.
Yeah.
And even though people take sides, it's never the same again. And that person who, maybe needed the support at the time sort of loses it all just because they took that stand to come up. But in the long run, of course, it is better for them, but it's sad that it is that person usually who ends up, in who ends up alone, sort of.
I so relate to that because I can talk about times when I have called out toxic relationships, whether it is in my personal life or professional life. And I have had to face the backlash. And like you said, I became the black sheep
Yeah,
because people do not like to talk about things that are going wrong. Nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room.
yeah,
Everybody wants to pretend that everything is going fine, just maintain the so called decorum and the facade, even if it is fake, because it doesn't destabilize the, the some kind of a harmony that you may have, or the fact that you think it is even harmonious. To me, that's a question, because is it really real or is it fake? But the person who calls it out becomes the one who faces the backlash. It's like the whistleblower. Whenever there is a whistleblower, it is the whistleblower who has to face the brunt before even realizing that, okay, do we need to investigate? Is there something really wrong? What is this person trying to say? And that is when the gaslighting happens. The fact that you complained, everybody starts attacking you. That's the unfortunate scenario.
yeah. If you are comfortable sharing, would you be able to talk about a moment where you felt that you were in a toxic relationship?
Yeah, in fact, I have several. So I think let me get started with my marriage. So I was in an extremely toxic, rather abusive marriage, which thankfully didn't live for more than 3 years. But I was in one of those relationships, and I did not realize it for the longest that I was in a toxic relationship. So, to begin with, there was constant criticism, there was manipulation, there was coercion. I always felt I had to walk on eggshells around that person. And of course, later on, there was verbal and physical abuse. But even before the abuse part came, I didn't realize that I was in an unhealthy relationship. And I remember one of my very close friends meeting me after my marriage, I think 6 months after my marriage. And she looked at my face and she said, "You don't look happy. You look lost. What's happening?" And I said, "Nothing." She said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, everything is okay." And I think after several months we met, and she again asked me, "Is everything okay?" And I think at that time I was somewhere beginning to realize that something was amiss, but I didn't know what. And I immediately justified by saying, "Well, but I love him. He loves me." She sensed something was not okay because of her own experience. And she said, "Hey, you know that if it is not okay, you can leave." And I was so defensive. I immediately said, "No, but I love him." And so I think that becomes another thing, that you feel that there is love while there is no respect. And I wonder whether that is because you got into the relationship because it was a love marriage. And so you trying to, maintain that.
Yeah,
Or is it genuinely that you're still feeling that love? Because when I look back and I have analyzed and analyzed it several times over in the last so many decades, that I feel the moment I felt disrespected, I didn't feel love. There was no love, because that, your self esteem gets corroded, and you are
yeah,
not able to even respect yourself for being in that relationship, and you are being disrespected constantly. You feel that the decision making power is in somebody else's hand, whether it is a small matter of what are we going to eat for dinner versus if you're buying something in the house or purchasing a car or purchasing a house, everything gets decided by somebody else. And I felt
Mhm.
that as though I didn't have a voice, my opinions didn't count. And even if there was a conflict, and I was the one who was feeling like I had been treated badly, and I would raise that issue. In the end, the other person will end up crying or feeling bad, and I had to take care of the other person,
Yeah.
and that to me felt very warped, even at that time. That, hey, I was the one who was suffering, and now I am having to take care of the other person. But again, there was no term called gaslighting in those days. I didn't know
Yeah.
that was gaslighting, right? So I think my marriage was definitely one very, very strong example for me. And the moment I talked about it, I felt that whether it was family or common friends, everybody started to convince me to stay in the marriage.
Mhm.
Everybody started to point to me that these things happen in a marriage. It's all right. Everything will be fine. He's apologizing. And I just couldn't understand that when there were several instances over the 3 years, repeated instances, similar patterns, I was already seeing a pattern. Then how is it that one sorry could just correct everything? I knew that you needed to really change dramatically, like almost transform, like just how a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. Only then there could be change. But
Yeah.
at that time, I just felt everybody pushed me to the point that they were all like, just go back. Don't talk about it. Why are you taking this stand? No, it is all right. Marriages are like this, like whatever their defense and argument. The second one I feel is again, which was toxic, unhealthy co-worker relationship with a very senior member in my organization. And even there, because this person was a man and senior, nobody wanted to hear. Nobody wanted to find out what was the issue. And the person who complains, and especially if you're a female, you are the problem maker. You are somebody who's creating a problem. And so,
Mhm.
while I had been in the organization longer, I had a significant standing in the organization. I ended up being the one who was isolated. My own coworkers slash friends in the organization just deserted me. And after I had resigned because it had become very toxic and unhealthy, almost 6, 8 months later, when they had done an investigation on the person, they figured out that all that I had raised was actually correct. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you have something to share there. I can see.
Um, I mean, one of the things that I related to is how sorry cannot fix everything,
Yeah,
because it's just, and after a point, the word sort of loses meaning and it becomes like, okay, you're saying sorry, but are you really changing anything? But then again, you look back at it and you're like, I still love them. So maybe I'm the one who should, maybe I should just forgive them.
yeah,
Maybe let's, if we just forget about it and if I give them one more chance, then something might change. And then you realize that you've given infinite chances and nothing has changed. And yeah, that's when I think you need to take the call to
yeah.
step out of it.
Right, right. And that's something so important to understand the distinction between the early stages of a relationship. Because when you're in an early stage of a relationship, you're getting to know each other. And it could happen that you may step on the toes, the other person.
Yeah,
And but when you say sorry and then you change your behavior, then there is a progression. There is something to
yeah,
do, right? But if there is a pattern that you're finding yourself in where several instances of sorry is not leading to any change, that means you need to go and probe further whether there is something to it or is it just an early stage. Because I also don't want people who are our audience who's listening to this jump to a conclusion that one mistake means I'm in a toxic relationship.
yeah,
No, it is not that, because like I said, if you're in an early stage of a relationship, or even if you're not in an early stage, we don't know ourselves well enough. How can we expect the other person to know us completely? So if
Mhm.
there is a crisis, if there is an unforeseen situation that comes up, I respond or react in a certain way that doesn't work for you. Or I said something which was hurtful, disrespectful. Now, when you point that out to me, or when I realize it myself, do I take responsibility for that behavior? Do I take accountability? When I take accountability and I acknowledge and I make a change, so that next time, if there's anything similar that comes about, I'm not going back in that same behavior, then it's a different scenario,
Yeah.
right? So I think that is a distinction which we need to understand. And we are constantly learning, right? Every relationship is teaching us so much. So I think that's important to understand.
Yes. So for my next question, what are some of the first steps that someone can take when they do realize that there is toxicity in their relationship?
Yeah, very, very relevant and important conversation here. I think the first thing is to just understand the dynamics. Like, for example, we talked about the pattern. What kind of patterns am I in? What is happening here?
Mhm.
The second thing is to really stop engaging when you see that pattern coming up. Find a way to not get into that drama that is going to unfold because you're familiar with it. That, for example, let's just say that when I was married and I would talk about something to do with my family, whether it was to meet my family or go and see my friends or whatever, my ex-husband will often react in a way that he didn't want me to do that. He had isolated me from all my so-called loved ones or support group. Now, if I know that that is going to be the scenario, then I need to find a different strategy when I'm going to talk about my family or friends when they are visiting me or I'm going to meet them, a different
Mhm.
strategy. Because there is no point getting into that scenario and then letting it escalate. Because I will keep saying that, no, I want to meet them. He would keep saying, no, you can't meet them, or you're going to
Yeah.
meet them on my terms and conditions. And then when that would escalate, it would end up being an abusive scenario. And often I was the one who was the recipient of that abuse. So one needs to really find out that if it is a toxic relationship where one person behaves in a disrespectful way and one person has the power, then you need to really safeguard yourself. Don't engage when there is a potential issue, or figure out a strategy how you're going to engage in that. Two, because I'm in the space of energy healing, there are several energy tools that we can do, and we can actually practice, which will allow us to not have these instances coming up, or even if they come up, they are not of that intensity. For example, a simple technique that I teach people, which is cord cutting. It is called energetic cord cutting. Whenever there are two people who come in contact with each other, whether it's friendship, intimate relationship, co-worker, or whatever that is, we exchange energy, right? And if it is an unhealthy relationship, then there is unhealthy attachment that is there between the two people. So you visualize that there is a cord cutting from that person, cord coming from that person, which is attaching at your navel. You cut that cord and you release that person, and you tell yourself that I release the unhealthy energy that exists between the two of us. You wish the person well and you let them go. There is more detailed video that I have on my social media, which if anybody is interested can go through it. But when we do something like that, you will actually begin to see a shift. Or a
Mhm.
simple practice that I teach is visualize a white light here, the space where you put a bindi or in between your eyebrows of that person who is toxic, right? It sounds very esoteric, and you may wonder, does this work? How would it work? But a simple thing is that we know this spot is very significant when you look at the yogic science, yogic practices, and
Yeah.
otherwise. This is a seat of intuition, the eye of the third eye spot, right? Where you believe that when you get into meditation or certain practices, you concentrate here, right? So you're stimulating that site. Now, each one of us we all have that place in our third eye. Now, those who practice, they are more self-aware. They are aware of what is kindness, respect. They are mindful of their behaviors. There are others who are not. That doesn't mean if there's somebody who's aggressive to me that they don't have that. They have it, but they are not tapping into it, right? So it is almost like, okay, I'm capable of a healthy lifestyle, but I'm choosing not to have and not to run, not to exercise, and just increase my weight. Does it mean that I don't have the potential to be healthy? Of course not. The day I choose, I can be healthy physically. The same
Yeah.
way, the day they choose, they can actually be more mindful, courteous, kind, whatever. But by imagining that white light for the other person who's being aggressive or attacking you, you are energetically inviting that person to operate from that place. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It may be challenging in the beginning because you are so angry and your relationship with that person is conflict ridden. So
Yeah.
the first reaction is, I don't believe they have that capacity, or I don't think that's going to help.
Mhm.
Those are the first responses that I hear from people, or I have responded like that when I was told. However, fake it till you can make it, right? Because you're not going to lose anything by imagining. Give it a try. Every time you think of that person, imagine a white light there. Or begin by imagining a white light for yourself and then imagine for the other person. Just do it for as long as you can, especially in relationships that you can't end immediately, which is usually family, co-worker, or a very close relationship, right? But there are relationships that you can immediately delink. Fine. If you can, then get out of it. If you know it is extremely toxic, get out. But if you can't, then do these practices. Get a physical distance as much as possible if it is feasible, right? For
Yeah.
example, if you're living together and you can't immediately leave the house, but can you spend more time outside? Or if it is a close friendship, can you bring in some distance where you're not spending that much time with that person? You're reducing your time. And in the beginning, that may also lead to backlash where the other person may feel that they have less control over you and they will notice that you're not spending time. So they will attack you for that too. So you have to figure out a strategy that is good enough. And the rationale is good enough why you're bringing this physical distance. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things. And if you're in an abusive relationship, then I will highly encourage get a counselor, get a therapist, go to somebody where you will get help. Not be re-victimized, but get help. If you are in a domestic violence situation, there is this National Domestic Violence Cell, or there are
Mhm.
different organizations that can prevent you or protect you. But do take help given the severity of your scenario.
Yeah. So, for one of my last questions, I would like to ask how important are boundaries in reclaiming your power, and how can someone begin to set these boundaries?
Oh, yeah, very, very important. And if at all, I can just say that that is the answer for
Yeah.
any toxic relationship, because remember one thing, and this I'm saying it with a word of caution. I'm not saying this to blame you, but there is something in me that was attracting such relationships,
Yes.
right? And so I need to understand that what is it that I'm seeking, where I'm beginning to look outside and I'm discounting the abusive behavior because I need that so badly. So for me, it was a sense of belonging and this need to be loved, which was so high that I would discount the disrespectful treatment, right? So the first thing is to understand that what in you is getting fulfilled. When you understand that, you begin to go within. And then you figure out a way to give that to yourself. Yes, we can love ourselves. And yes, I understand that there is a joy in sharing that with other people. And you will share it with other people. It doesn't mean that if you give that love to you, that means you don't deserve a healthy relationship. No, when you find a healthy partner, then you will have a healthy relationship, right? So the first thing is to understand your need and your pattern. That is attracting such relationships. Second, you will figure out a way to have this boundary, just like we have a physical boundary to protect ourselves from people. Say, for example, you get into a crowded elevator. You don't want standing too close to somebody where you will feel that it's uncomfortable. Even if the other person is not intentionally making you uncomfortable, but you feel uncomfortable. So you will have your strategy. Either you maintain a physical distance, but if there is no distance, we use our bag, we use whatever it is,
Yeah.
we pull our friend close to ourselves so that we are sticking to them rather than a stranger, right? That's a physical boundary. The same way you will have an emotional boundary. You will find ways to test waters. How much do I want to go in when I make a new friendship, or if I'm getting into relationship and I'm dating? How far do I want to go? How soon do I want to go? What are the questions I need to ask? One of the persons had told me that because you end up being in several unhealthy relationships, it's almost like, she quoted, your picker is broken, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you probably have to unlearn that way of
Yeah.
picking those relationships and people, right? So you have to learn a new way to pick those people and relationships. Find what works for you. And the best way to understand that is, what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? What is my value system? So, for example, for me, respect is very, very important. So if I feel that a person is making disrespectful jokes or is saying things even very casually about somebody else, which I feel is distasteful and disrespectful, to me, it is a red flag. And I'm not here to teach you how to be respectful, right? If I'm meeting somebody who's an adult, grown-up individual, whether it is for friendship or dating, I would want you to have that awareness when I meet you. And if you don't carry that, then it's clearly a no-go for me, right? And so that is a way of having a boundary. The other thing is, if I'm not okay with something and I'm telling you I'm not okay with, how respectful are you with my boundary? Are you still pushing? Are you still negotiating? Or are you like, okay, fine. When you're okay with it, Smita, you let me know, and then we will go ahead with this or not. Right? So, knowing about your comfort zone, your value system, what is negotiable and what is not negotiable, will help you find out your boundary. And always, if in the beginning stage, since we don't know the boundary and it's a new thing we are coming up with, test boundary. Tell the other person, hey, give me some time, I'll come back to you. Or at this point, it doesn't feel okay, can I come back to you? That doesn't mean it is a no, unless it's a clear no. But test boundary. And if you think that you are not sure, go to your counselor, go to a close friend, a confidant who you trust, who you believe has done this work and they know what is a healthy boundary. Some people very intrinsically have a very good sense of boundary because they grew up in that environment where
Yeah.
they were allowed to have a boundary and they were respected because of the boundary. They're very good at it. And you can spot those people in your life. So you go and talk to that person. Just one example that I'll share. I was in a conversation with a colleague and I expressed my discomfort with something. And the person immediately responded saying that was very hurtful. And I did not realize that was gaslighting. But when I was talking to a friend of mine who has a very good sense of boundary, she immediately said, oh, no way, that person didn't say that. I said, well, they said it. And that is when they had told me that I can be open and honest. And my friend immediately said, well, they were gaslighting you. Until that time, I had not used the term gaslighting, but I knew it didn't feel okay. So for some people, it comes very naturally. They would know it. So go test with them. Bounce off those discussions, conversations, if they have already happened or if they are yet to happen. Practice with them. So you can practice boundary setting and then go back and engage with that person involved. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I notice in our generation is that there is this constant need to be in a relationship.
Mhm.
And because of that, even though people may know that this is toxic and this is, this is crossing my boundaries, they do not communicate. And that is something that I notice in my generation, and definitely in the younger generation, because communication and talking about something that is not so pleasant to talk about is very, very often avoided. And I think it's because of that that a lot of the issues are caused, because people may know that this is not working for them or this is crossing their boundaries, but because they so badly want that relationship, they either discount it or they don't bring it up. Sometimes people even think that, oh, I can change the other person, right? So this is like, I feel like one of the biggest reasons that at least people in my generation and younger still stay in the relationship, even if they do know, that this isn't working out for them.
And that is so unfortunate because I remember when I was doing my own doctoral dissertation, which was basically about abusive relationships and how, I was looking at professionals, how work plays a role in getting out of those relationships. I came across statistics, and this was US based statistics. In 2015, at least in the US, the dating violence amongst teens were increasing at the rate of 40%. This is 10 years ago, right? And so
Yes,
I am not surprised to hear that now in India, if we are talking about in our context, that there is unhealthy relationship. I'm not going to a conclusion that it is all abusive, but I'm just saying even if it is unhealthy and toxic relationship, it's unfortunate because the need to be in a relationship is so high. And I'm sure the peer pressure is immense.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you think there is any avenue for people to actually, you know, open up and talk? Do you think there is anything that can be done?
I mean, I would suggest starting off the conversation somewhere, maybe if not with your partner, like, the person who you're having trouble with, at least with your best friends, or, someone you trust, a brother, a sister, a cousin, your parent, anyone. I think unless you start talking,
Right.
nothing is really going to happen. So if it's too difficult to talk to the person themselves, I would suggest bring it up somewhere. One thing that really helps me is therapy, because that space is completely distant from my home setting, my school setting, everything. So that is definitely one place that I would recommend anyone to go to and talk about anything that you're facing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I absolutely second that, just to talk about it in safe places. Because when
Yes.
you're in a toxic relationship, you may not be able to talk with that person because there are
Yeah.
repercussions, right? There's a backlash. Then how do you find another safe place? A friend, a counselor, a teacher, or somebody else? Maybe there is a family member, but who can you talk to so that you can get some perspective, whether this is really harming you or whether this is a difficult phase in a relationship? And then what do you do about it? Right? I
Yeah.
would, feel that if we can have more informal forums where people
Mhm.
can start having conversations about these topics, and then that can have a ripple effect in terms of people then talking with other friends that, hey, I was in this conversation and this is what came about and this is what I learned or I just got information about. Because the first time I realized that I was in an abusive relationship was when I met a gynecologist. I had just gone for a regular checkup. I didn't know that my gynecologist was also a family counselor. And she started
Okay.
asking me some very probing, intimate questions about my marriage. And when I answered, she asked me that, then do you realize there's a problem in the marriage? And in that session, that meeting is still so clear in my head. This is almost like 22 years ago. I was sitting in her chamber, and that was a moment when it dawned on me that I was in an abusive relationship. And many years later, I realized that doctors are actually trained to screen for abuse in a marriage, especially gynecologists. Definitely, they're trained
Yes.
to find that out. So, yeah, I think there will be a merit in having more conversations like that. And that's why I think this conversation that we are having, so that people can Here people can learn and people can then start thinking or reflecting and then have follow-up questions or discussions with whoever they can, either one of us or other people in their life that they can reach out to. But I strongly believe that we all deserve to be in healthy relationships
Yeah.
because that's where the joy is. That's where the fun part is. You learn more about yourself, you enjoy, you share happy moments, and you grow. But if you're in toxic, unhealthy relationship, then your energy is getting drained. You're not growing, rather you're getting depleted and you're losing confidence. Because from my own experience, I can only tell you that after that one toxic abusive marriage that I was in, it was for years that I didn't have the courage to even begin dating. Not that I didn't want to be in a relationship, but I had lost that confidence in myself because I had made such a big mistake. That's what I thought. I it was self blame, which is very common.
Yeah.
I went into that
Yes.
cycle that I thought it was my responsibility, my mistake, while it was not. Yes, what was important was for me to understand my role in terms of my patterns and not to get into one, but it didn't happen. And very often, once you get out from a toxic relationship, if you have not engaged in self work, it's a very great chance that you'll again fall into another toxic relationship. It is a cycle of toxic relationships in different spheres of your life before you finally arrest that and say enough is enough. I'm exhausted, I'm drained, I can't do this anymore, I need to break this pattern.
Yeah.
So that is something which we have to really prevent and watch out for, because then you are just going to get into this mode of isolating yourself and not wanting to be in relationship, where
Yeah.
you are missing out on something good, and other people who can be in good relationships with you, they are missing out on you.
Yeah.
Right? Any other question, Elena, or anything
No,
you'd like to share?
that's all. That's all from my side.
Okay, so thank you so much, Elena, for taking time and asking such pertinent questions. I enjoyed this conversation, even though the topic was intense. But I wish you well and thank you so much. And thank you to
Thank
all the
you.
viewers listening to us.
Thank you.